Shabbos, first of all, so thank you for coming on. And you have been so unbelievable. And I'm sure you're exhausted at this point. I mean, truly exhausted, but fired up, right? So, a couple of things that I think would be really helpful for you to explain, because I think, when I made this, because I felt like I had so much information that I have done deep research on, and I wanted other people to really know what I knew. You have experienced so much since October 7th. And you and I come from totally different worlds. We don't know each other. And I know that you're a lifelong Democrat and your entire world has been overturned. And I'd love you to share a little bit about how you are and like how you feel. I mean, you've taken on a lot. You've taken on this fight, especially at Harvard, but bigger than Harvard.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for everything you're doing, Aliza. For those of you who don't follow Aliza, make sure to do so because, yes, we've never met in person, but the work you're doing is so crucial. I'm in the car. The reason I'm in the car is because I've been at Binghamton University all day, meeting with Jewish students, meeting with professors, trying to understand what their situation has been like. And thank God, relatively speaking, it's been better than other universities, but really strategizing as to how we can move forward. That's really how I've been spending the last 12 months as a university student, going across the country, meeting with like-minded individuals, meeting with Jewish students, hearing their perspective, and then strategizing what we can do to change. So as you alluded to, not only am I a lifelong Democrat, I registered to vote as a Democrat the day I turned 18. When I was 9 years old, I convinced my dad to have a Barack Obama yard sign in Hebrew on the front lawn. I was 12 when I was making phone calls for then Newark Mayor and now Senator Cory Booker. I've knocked on doors for more Democrats than I can count. And the reason I did that, and to some extent still do it, is because I am a Democrat and I'm a liberal. I believe in liberal and progressive policies, like the freedom for women to choose their reproductive choices, raising the minimum wage to $15, pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. However, I have had direct experiences with the unvarnished naked Jew hatred that so many Jewish Americans have experienced as well. I have seen post-October 7th how those same progressive allies, how those liberal voices and policymakers have at best abandoned the Jewish community and at worst enabled the anti-Semitism that I've been experiencing. So I did not endorse anyone for about 10, 11 months. I did not like Trump. In fact, there are many policies I still don't like that Trump offers. But in August, I think it was, I came out publicly at the Republican Jewish Coalition as a supporter of his. The reason I did that is because I had tried to the best of my ability to get my own party to take this issue seriously. I, for example, said, look, the Republican National Convention had a Jewish student, it was me, speak about anti-Semitism. Have a Jewish student, doesn't have to be me, have a Jewish student speak about anti-Semitism. They would say no. I asked the Democratic Party and Democratic political operatives to make it clear that they would not support an arms embargo. The Kamala Harris campaign, they do not meet with Jewish students, but through the surrogates, they said she would never call for an arms embargo. Her surrogates lied to us. She called for an arms embargo just last week. When I testified in front of the House Judiciary Committee, the ranking member, Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler, fell asleep. When I testified in front of the House Education Committee, ranking Democratic member Bobby Scott criticized us for focus exclusively on anti-Semitism. The Senate, which of course is controlled by the Democratic Party, has not had one hearing exclusively on anti-Semitism. Instead, they all lives matter the issue to talk about all forms of hate. And then I would argue most crucially, the Senate Democratic Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, who calls himself the protector of Israel, because of him, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which is a bipartisan piece of legislation that would alleviate the concerns that I and many Jewish students have, has been held up, has not been given a floor vote to the Senate. So the question isn't really, how could you support Trump? The question that I pose to Jewish Americans is, why are you supporting Kamala Harris? This is a woman who has not met with one Jewish student since October 7th. This is a woman who told Israel not to go into Rafah, which if Israel listened to, Yahweh Sinwar would still be alive. You can only vote for Kamala Harris as a Jewish American if you're honest with yourself. If you say that Israel and anti-Semitism and the hostages just don't matter as much as abortion and the minimum wage. And I disagree with it, but that's an argument. But don't don't gaslight Jewish Americans into thinking that she would somehow be better for the Jewish American community when she won't even meet with the Jewish American community.
So, what do you say to people who are like, Trump is worse than Hitler? Trump is a dictator. Trump hates Jews. How can you trust him? It's like, how are you confident in your choice?
You know, we're so grateful because unlike Kamala Harris, Donald Trump has a track record. He was president already. If he was the second coming of Hitler, what's he waiting for? If he was meant to send us into camps, why didn't he do it already? The reality is, forget about his Jewish grandkids. Forget about the fact that his grandkids are observant. Or just Ivanka Trump just posted a picture of her in the sukkah with her kids. This is someone who brought the embassy to Jerusalem, something that every American president said they would do and then reneged on it. This is someone who recognized the Golan Heights as Israel's sovereignty. This is someone who produced regional peace with the Abraham Accords, which were historic. This is someone who redefined Judaism under the law as part of the Title VI provision of the Civil Rights Act, because of which I and dozens of Jewish students across the country have lawsuits against Harvard and against our universities over anti-Semitism. So the arguments that he's anti-Semitic, I mean, give me the evidence. Show me the proof. Does he say things that I disagree with? Absolutely. Has he met with people who he should not have met with? Absolutely. And I've condemned him for it. I've spoken out against him. But if you want to play this game of who's met with who, there's only one person running for president who's friends with Ilhan Omar, that has Iranian agents and former students for justice in Palestine working at the White House. And it's not Donald Trump. So I would encourage my liberal friends to not play that game, because I don't think they will come out on top.
So well said. So I don't know if I know you're busy today, but Times of Israel had an article, a headline today that said anti-Israel U.S. campus groups radicalize with no one to stop them, experts warn. And then they go on to say former security officials say increasingly violent rhetoric mimics that of 1960s students who pivoted to domestic terror. It's going unhindered as students point to First Amendment.
Yeah.
How do we solve this?
Well, first we have to validate it, because I think of my own experience, the amount of people, including Jews, have said we're exaggerating, this is anti-Zionism, or this is just issues of free speech. It's not true. You just articulated something that is very real and very scary. Hezbollah themselves, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps themselves, have admitted that they are funding a significant amount of the radicalism we see, not just on our college campuses, but on our streets across this country. One of the ways we solve it as a Jewish community is by not allowing our votes to be taken for granted. One of the reasons that the Democratic Party has not met with Jewish students, has not articulated a clear plan to combat anti-Semitism, has not called for the repudiation of the arms embargo, is because they know they can do nothing and they will still get 70-75% of the Jewish vote. We must make our voices heard. We must make it clear that the radicalism on our campuses, the fact that you have terror-linked organizations like Samidun that are recruiting at Columbia University, this is not only unacceptable and illegal, this goes against the very core of our liberal democracy, of our Western society, and we're not going to take it anymore. We're going to vote for policymakers who make these issues a focal point of their campaign, who are going to do something about it. And that means, for example, deporting non-American students who violate American law. This should not be controversial. This should not be partisan, because guess what? This has been in law for 50 years. It's just never enforced. This includes taking away the federal funds for universities that have encouraged this anti-American terrorist behavior. This includes stripping away the accreditation of universities that have violated the civil rights of minority students on campus. And again, I don't understand why this has become a partisan issue. I don't understand why it's only the Republicans who are doing anything, but they're the only ones doing anything. And my vote, as a result, in 2024 will be for the Republican nominee for president.
I really can't believe where we are. And one question I have to ask you, because a lot of people ask me this, my sister actually specifically, we don't know a lot about you. We know your voice. Can you tell us a little bit? Has this derailed your entire career, or has this been a good thing? Like, what are you?
Okay, this is a good 10 p.m. therapy. I like this. So yeah, when I'm not suing Harvard, I actually study religion. I'm very passionate about studying theology from an academic perspective. That's why I came to Harvard. Unfortunately, I got an education, of course, in anti-Semitism, but that's really not why I went. Pre-October 7th, I was just a regular nerd writing mediocre research papers in the library. I still am a nerd. I just don't write research papers as much. And I have to say, it's going to sound a little odd, but people shouldn't know who I am. I'm really not an impressive individual. I haven't done anything noteworthy. I've complained. I pointed out problems. But the fact of the matter is, our universities, our institutions of higher learning have become so corrupted, have become so blatantly anti-Semitic and anti-American that, yeah, people know me. And yeah, I have to speak at the Republican convention. And yeah, I have to meet with President Trump to talk about these issues. That's how bad it's gotten. So my plan was to go into education, maybe teach religion. Certainly, it wasn't politics. I mean, I was interested in it. I followed it, but no one was asking me for endorsements, for example. No one was asking me to speak at rallies, nor should they have done, because I'm just a regular student. But again, it's such a damning indictment on our universities that regular students have become the face of, I don't mean me, but other students like Tessa Vexler, Eli Civis, Yal Jacoby. They've really become the face of a new movement of young American Jews who are going to stand up for their civil rights. So bottom line is, I'm just a student. I'm just a regular guy. The only difference is post October 7th, I now have an audience. But anti-Semitism was rampant and pervasive at Harvard and across college campuses for years. And it's a shame it took October 7th for people to wake up to that reality.
Sure is. Okay, so you've been in these meetings with former President Trump. Give us a glimpse into what the conversation is like on this subject.
Sure. So the last time I was with him was when he was actually at the Ohel, the resting place of the Chabad Lubavitch rabbi. And I told him, I said, very matter of fact, because of your executive order in 2019 pertaining to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, we now have lawsuits. And here's what we Jewish students need in the future. We need you to keep the public pressure on. And more importantly, we need you to put the brakes on the slew of federal funding that the universities receive. And every time we've raised these issues, he is receptive. He speaks about it. I was there with President Trump when he spoke in D.C. in front of Miriam Adelson for a fundraiser, and then about an hour later at the Israel-American Council conference. And both times, I was there both times, he mentioned, unprompted, that this is a serious issue that demands a national response. He has been incredibly receptive to our students. He has listened to us. He has heard us. He has expressed sympathies. And more importantly, he has told us what he's going to do about it. The reason I endorsed Trump is not because I agree with him on most policies. It's really because he and his campaign reached out to us. They made an effort to do what all campaigns should do, which is to court our vote, court our support. Kamala Harris could have done that. The Democratic Party could have done that. But she hasn't met with Jewish students. They haven't told us what they're going to do to protect us. And look, I believe in abortion. I believe in gay rights. But we can't really talk about abortion if we're dead. The fact that you still have 7 American hostages, and as I told you, I was just driving back from Binghamton University. Omer Nutra, the American Jewish civilian who's still being held hostage in Gaza by Hamas, he was meant to be at Binghamton. He deferred for a year to be in Israel. I was meant to be with him right now. He should have been on campus meeting with and participating in Jewish life on campus, but he isn't. He's being held as a hostage. He's going to give Israel what they need to get the Americans out. He is going to give Jewish students a voice and justice. And again, Kamala Harris could have done the exact same thing, but she deliberately chose and is deliberately choosing not. So
why do you think, the Muslim vote isn't even as big as our vote? Why make that choice? Why do you think she made that choice?
So twofold. One, it is true that the Jewish vote is larger than the Muslim vote. The problem is the Muslim vote is more concentrated, especially in a state like Michigan. Michigan, of course, is central to the blue firewall that Kamala Harris needs to win the election. So we do have to be a little cynical. We do have to focus on the fact that electoral politics are at play, which is why when you had Rachel and John Goldberg-Polin, the parents of the American hostage Hirsch Goldberg-Polin, who of course was murdered by Hamas, when they spoke at the Democratic Convention, you know who spoke right before them? The anti-Semite Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison. So they always have to do the both side, the all lives mattering. So that's number one. And then number two, and this is based on my experience as a university student at Harvard, you probably heard this. In fact, I know you speak about this on social media. It really is DEI. And in particular, this mindset that all classes, all peoples are either oppressed or oppressors. Jews have the misfortune of being mischaracterized as white. And whether it was 4 babies, 40 babies, or 40,000 babies beheaded on October 7th, it kind of doesn't matter, because as my classmates will tell you, resistance is justified when people are occupied, which is why you don't have this obvious immediate sympathy for the state of Israel, this obvious immediate sympathy for Jewish students, because, oh, it's complicated. Oh, there's a both sides to this. There's no both sides to terrorism. There's no nuance or complexity when it comes to the rape of Jewish women, but the liberal mentality, and again, I'm speaking as a Democrat who only basically have liberal friends. but the liberal mentality has really perversed itself. It's corrupted itself and it's poisoned itself. It has focused so much on identity politics, on race and gender, everything except intellectual diversity, that they have fooled themselves into thinking that the true side, the just side, the noble side is with Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. And I think you really do see that on the Democratic side. That certainly explains Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman. And it's scary. I'll just end by saying this anecdote. 4 or 5 years ago, when Bibi spoke in front of Congress, roughly 10 Democratic lawmakers skipped the speech. When he spoke 2 months ago, it was 100 Democratic lawmakers. So the numbers are growing. It's not just 4 or 5 that we can ignore. It's dozens and dozens that are only getting bigger and stronger.
So when you walk around, do people argue with you? Do they approach you? Do people stay away?
Well, the Jewish moms really like me, so they're my rock. They're my base of support. Yeah, big fan of Jewish moms. So it's complicated. I'll put it this way. After October 7th, a producer from a major network reached out to me and said, we want to do a live debate between you as a Jewish pro-Israel student at Harvard and a pro-Palestinian student at Harvard. And it would be respectful. You would shake hands, and it would model to the country what disagreeing better can look like. The debate was never aired. It was never filmed. Why? Because to this day, we have not been able to get one anti-Israel student on Harvard's campus to agree to a respectful debate. Because in their own words, we don't want to legitimize the Zionist narrative. We don't want to pretend that there is this equal footing between us and you. So unfortunately, a lot of it is just ignoring. There is no space for dialogue, unfortunately. And the reason I say unfortunately is because universities are meant to be about the pursuit of truth. It's meant to be about challenging you to go beyond your comfortable intellectual limits. But universities in the United States have become an incubator for the opposite. They become an incubator for the echo chamber, for partisan politics, for identity politics. And most of the conversations and respectful dialogue I have with people, it's not based on the university. It's not based on the students, but it's, people on the streets. So I left Harvard. I'm not there anymore. I finished in June. And I was back briefly a month ago. I spoke at the Harvard Jewish Alumni Alliance. It was about, I think, 1,000 Jewish alumni, roughly. And I spoke for a couple of minutes. But it was sad. I did not feel any sense of nostalgia, any sense of warmth when I was walking through campus again, when I was passing, my classrooms, because Harvard has fallen. The Ivy Leagues and institutions of higher learning in the United States, they have really betrayed Jewish students. And I encourage Jewish students and I encourage American Jews, show your frustration at the ballot box. That is the most immediate and direct way that we can not only amplify voices that need to be amplified, but that we can create long-lasting change. Don't allow your votes to be taken for granted. Take it from a Democrat. I know that the Democratic Party is taking your vote for granted. They have not had any serious outreach or mobilization to concerned or disillusioned Jewish Americans. They just haven't. So why would you propagate that party?
Yeah. I mean, it's a question people have to answer for themselves. Shabbos, I'm so glad that we just did this impromptu second round. Amazing. I'm sure you're exhausted and have stuff to do, as everyone is. But I'm just curious, would you ever consider running?
I've thought about it. I think the problem is, I'll give you a funny problem. I get death threats a lot, and the death threats are from the far right and the far left. So, both sides want me dead. And I think I would want to run, but I don't know for which party. Because I'm not a Republican, but I did endorse Trump. And I wouldn't say I'm a Democrat, but I'm pretty liberal. So it'll be a complicated election if I do decide to run. So we'll see.
One more question. Did you know that you had this fight in you before?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm still a nerd. That's a critical distinction.
I would never take that away.
Thanks. I mean, look, thank you for saying that. I do appreciate it. And I really do feel a sense of privilege that I've been given a voice. And I've been on the national media. I've met with President Trump. And I'm privileged. Really, I am. I take that as a serious responsibility. At the same time, I don't think, and I'm not looking for compliments or fishing for compliments. I do mean this seriously. What I'm doing is not really remarkable. It's just speaking not only for truth, but speaking for the values that have been ingrained within me based on the community I was raised in. And people often ask me, do you get nervous before a talk? Do you get nervous before a big speech? And I don't. I really don't. It's not because I'm confident. It's just because what I'm speaking is my lived experience, number one, but it's also what I know to be true. I'm not doing anything different than pre-October 7th. And I'm flattered that people listen. I'm flattered that I'm given a platform. But I think the fight, I think that enthusiasm, it just comes from the fact that I grew up in a Jewish community. I went to a Jewish day school. I have siblings who live in Israel, including some who are fighting in the IDF right now. And they're the real heroes. I'm just doing what I can in a personal capacity. And, this is a good place to end it, because your listeners and your followers, they can do exactly what I'm doing, and they could do it a whole heck of a lot better, because I'm not a politician. I didn't have any resources. I kind of just got lucky. But your followers, and certainly you, people who do know what they're doing, people who are articulate and knowledgeable, they can be far more successful, and they can be the voice that we need. So no, I didn't know I had this within me. To me, it's just what I would do anyways, but I'm very touched and feel a sense of responsibility that I've been given this platform. So thank you very much.
Well, as an expert in personal branding and marketing and someone who's written 2 books, I can tell you, I am very positive you didn't just get lucky. It's an innate ability. I would flip it. You said they gave you a voice. No, you gave yourself a voice and people listened. And that's a really big difference.
Wow. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you, Shabbos. And am I going to see you next Monday at Blind Spot? Are you coming to Blind Spot?
Oh, yes. I should be there. Yes.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. So I'll just stitch this all together and it'll be like It happened in real time.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, and I'll see you next week.
Yeah, take care. Thank you very much.